Welcome to Discovering. It's berry time in the UP. We took a drive to Chatham and paid a visit to the Gierke blueberry farm.
These bushes were just hanging.
Then it's off to Marquette for a look at the Upper Great Lakes Regional Canoe Assembly. And we'll visit the mystery spot. That's all tonight, so sit back, put your feet up. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
I love blueberries. Blueberry pie, blueberry cheesecake, blueberry jam, and of course, blueberry pancakes. But I will admit, I don't care that much for crawling around the ground picking them. For those who can relate to what I'm saying, there may be hope. I paid a visit to the Gierke blueberry farm in Chatham, where the picking is a whole lot easier.
Opening day is like, I liken it to opening day of deer season. So people come out in the dark to get the good bush. And this year was no exception. We had a couple come from Ironwood or Iron River at about 10 to 6 in the morning. Crystal Falls, Iron River seems like they have a lot of blueberry addicts down there. Marquette, if they're not getting the wild berries, if the wild berry crop is light. Northern Wisconsin come up. All the parking spots will be filled up. I get help to help me with parking and crowd control. And this past year we had almost 4,000 pounds come off here on Saturday, August 13th. We have 3,500 bushes. They're 50 years old, plus or minus. There's a lot of varieties. These varieties tend to get ripe starting early to mid-August, depending on the year, and continue. We can have picking on a good year like this all the way till freeze up. And so we have some varieties that don't ripen until early October, and we often don't get those because they'll freeze up before they're ready. We average about 10,000 pounds get recorded or paid for out of here. On most years, we've had as small as crops as 2,300 pounds, and then our banner year was 2012, a real early spring, and that was 20,000 pounds of blueberries came off here. So we all know that blueberries are grown commercially down in Lower Michigan on the western side of the state, and the person that was the grandfather of commercial blueberry farming in Michigan was a professor of horticulture at Michigan State University. His name is Stanley Johnston. So he had this idea that blueberries could also grow in northern climates if they developed the right varieties. So he commissioned some farms to have test plots like this one, and Opa's down the lane here, and some other people that don't have official blueberry farms, but they have patches left over from those days. And I've even found journal papers, scientific papers that he's published about these test plots. And I guess there were a lot of them, but there's not many left. And the ones that sort of remained were in the Copper Country, and then it turns out there's some down in the Garden Peninsula. And my wife found in MSU Extension files a record of a letter from Stanley Johnson to my great-grandfather commissioning him with some blueberries, and no one in my family ever knew that my family ever grew blueberries until she found that letter. So I guess it's sort of in my blood, but it takes quite a while to grow blueberry bushes, especially up here in the north. We visit with a lot of people that come out here that have their own blueberry bushes, that they're still growing them, and they wonder how long it takes, and I really can't tell them because, you know, we've only had this farm for 11 years. We have a few small plants that we've planted, and they're knee high, and they're probably 10 years old, you know, and they don't produce enough to get a pie, unlike these big ones. These are pretty spectacular, and on opening day, these bushes were just hanging because of the weight of the berries, and roughly half of the crop has been taken off, so things have lightened up quite a bit. We've been doing this 11 years, which sounds like a long time, but I still feel like a newbie on it. The conditions, I think, for a really good year are during pollination time. So you want to have good conditions during pollination to get as many of those blossoms pollinated as possible. And then warm, they tend to like warm, so an early spring is good. Blueberry bush roots don't have many root hairs, and so they need sort of frequent rain. So this year was good in terms of frequent rain, but that hasn't stopped, and that's been bad. So a lot of the crop quality isn't as good as most years. The berries are a little mushy, a little waterlogged, just because of all the rain we've been getting. I'm surmising, I don't know for sure. Our best year, 2012, I don't know if those that remember the weather can go back. You know, I had got my first mosquito bite at the end of March that year. That was a 20,000 pound year. We opened right around the 1st of August. We haven't been open that early and since then. And we had opening day like picking for 2 weeks. You literally could fill up buckets from one bush and hardly even be able to tell that you'd picked berries. It was an amazing year. This year showed that kind of promise, other than the berry quality has been not as good. So people are a little disappointed. There's a lot of overripe berries that you have to pick around. Normally there's a lot of underripe berries that you have to pick around, but this year we have this sort of the opposite problem. So we have the honeybees to help with pollination, although most of the pollination probably happens with wild pollinators. But they're easy to raise, and we get honey from them. We try to overwinter them. Here in the Upper Peninsula, especially here in the copper country, that's an iffy proposition. If you can overwinter half of your hives, you're doing pretty well. So the 2 taller ones here overwintered last year. We insulate them and feed them in the fall and in the spring and through the winter. And then the 3 smaller ones were all brand new bees that were purchased this year. So you can see the ones that you overwinter, there's an advantage. Not only do you save the money from buying new bees, but you get a head start on the season. The bees are acclimated to the area, so they know where to go, and they have a larger population to start with. I have a water well here. It's 140 foot deep. It's drilled into the Jacobsville sandstone, and the bedrock here is about 12 feet deep, and the water table is about 50 feet deep. A lot of the farms up here had irrigation ponds, but then you have to filter that water because of the suspended material in it. So I had this water well drilled, and it's powered by this solar panel, 1500 watt solar panel. So I have a DC powered pump in the well, and it pumps water out to these pipes that go out to the drip lines. The ultimate capacity well is about 30 gallons per minute, but the pump that I have in there will do about, on a noontime sun, clear day, 16 to 18 gallons per minute, which is enough to do about half of the blueberry bushes on a given day, and then you can do the other half another day. So this bus used to drive around through Tri Mountain and South Range, which are small mining towns, old mining towns, in the summertime during strawberry season, and they would park, and parents would come out and put their kids on the bus, and that bus would come out here and the kids would pick strawberries all day long. Eventually this quit being a strawberry farm, and the bus got abandoned here. Some of the people that used to ride out here as kids will come out either blueberry picking or visiting, and they'll come out and take a look at the bus because they used to ride it as a kid. I put up trail cams, and we get pictures of bears in the off season of blueberry season, at mostly nighttime. I got some from this year. But we don't see bears on the fields much. The exception was that banner year 2012. The night before season or evening before, I was going around putting up some of these fence poles, and we chased a bear off in the back corner. And there were literally dozens of bear dropping piles throughout the patch. I was going around like it was a doggy park and picking up manure. But that only lasted a couple of days. The number of people that we have, and you can see things are sort of packed down, and the amount of human scent out here pretty much keeps them clear. And so then it takes about a month or so after the season, we close for the season, that we start seeing the deer and maybe bears coming back. But then, by that time it's hunting season, so their habits have changed. But the predation on the bushes is imperceptible. Same thing with birds. You're seeing birds flying around. I'm sure they're eating berries, but we rarely see that has an impact. Again, that 2012 year was unusual. There the fields were blue, and in the afternoon these flocks of seagulls would come in and they'd swoop down, and for a few minutes they'd be picking berries right off the bushes in flight. I've never seen anything like it, and not since. I think they have to be able to see the blue color from the air for them to notice that there's a decent crop. We've adopted policy like previous owners where this is open to the public. So we try to foster them to be self-sufficient in their picking, that they bring their own containers. We have a money box and a scale, and other than opening day, we don't work that, so people just come and go as they please. And hopefully we have their own change or send a check, or sometimes we get IOUs. This year on opening day we got several IOUs because people couldn't imagine they were going to pick as much as they did. And so in a good year things like that happen. The bushes are high. They're perfect height if you have a walker and you come out here with a walker. You can tie the bucket right to the walker, and I have pictures of elderly that have done that. In fact, we have an elderly group coming out from Little Brothers later this week. Wheelchairs, there's places you can wheel a wheelchair here. We mow, so I call it golf course picking. It's pretty easy walking for the most part, and the bushes are high. And we have buckets that we loan out. People can borrow those to pick their berries and then transfer them to bags if they forget. So we get a lot of drop-ins that people that just discover us as they're driving by and they're not really prepared. We're open daylight hours. Again, because it's self-sufficient, you can come anytime you want, and when we're open. And we put up reports on the internet and on our phone answering machine on the picking conditions, and we'll also post if we're closed. So some years, we haven't this year closed, but some years we close during the week to let things ripen up if we get a heavy pick and we have a limited crop.
If you've been watching the show for a while, you probably remember Craig Kitchen's canoe restoration project. I met up with Craig again on a rainy day in Marquette at the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association's Upper Great Lakes Regional Assembly, a great place for a look at some vintage canoes that have been brought back to life.
This is the Upper Great Lakes Regional Assembly, and it's the second time that we've had the assembly here in Marquette. The first time was 3 years ago, and the way that this works, we're members of the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association, the Upper Great Lakes chapter, Upper Peninsula chapter, and there's a downstate chapter, and there's also a Wisconsin chapter. And we rotate this regional assembly between the three chapters. So last year it was in downstate Michigan, and the year before it was over in Spooner, Wisconsin. The goal is to have canoes here and have different kinds of demonstrations so that people get an idea of what canoeing was about and still can be about as far as working with these old boats. This year, one of the things that we're doing here is we're trying to highlight 100-year-old canoes. And the oldest canoe that we have here was built in about 1890. It's a B.N. Morris that was made in Maine. Right now we have 11 100-year-old canoes here on display that have been restored and are being used in the water again. So we also have newer canoes on display. We have canoes here for sale, and we have different types of paraphernalia and gear that people make that is canoe related. And people also can learn how to build these boats and how to restore them by being members of the Wooden Canoe Heritage Association, because we all work together trying to promote the whole idea of restoring these canoes and bringing them back to a point where they can be used again. That's the whole reason for doing this. And also to record the history of the boat so that that doesn't get lost as well. These canoes here are canoes that are less than 100 years old, and actually some of them are modern canoes that have even been made recently by either members here of the organization or contemporary boat builders. So right now there's about probably 30 or 40 contemporary canoe builders in the United States that build wooden canoes. They either make wood strip canoes or they make the wood canvas canoes. So there are wood strip canoes over here that people can look at and that are brand new canoes, and then there's also wood canvas ones over here that are made by a contemporary builder here from Minnesota. All of the canoes here are over 100 years old. The oldest one was made in the 1890s, and it was restored 2 years ago by Dave Osborne and Ferdy Good over in Boulder Junction, Wisconsin. And it took them about a year to redo that one. And then there are several others that were rebuilt by various either members of the organization or by professional boat builders who restore them for the owners. 11 of them that are here now are all boats, examples of boats that have been brought back to life. Some of them were in various stages of disrepair when they were brought in, but they're back on the water now and they're being used. The interesting thing about these 100-year-old canoes is that they can pop up anywhere. The 1890 one, I believe, was found at the bottom of a lake, and somebody called the owner of it and asked them if they wanted it, and they recognized what it was. One of the ones that I have was found in a garage about 30 miles from here, and then there was another one that I found that was made in 1913 that was in somebody's barn for 25 years. And I think there are probably lots of these canoes in the UP that are in barns or garages or whatever, and they're just stored away and people don't know what they have, or they really don't know what to do with them, so they just stay there. And actually Dave Osborne, when he goes, he restores them for a living, and all he does is he goes around lakes with canoes that he has, and people call him over and say, hey, what can you do for this boat that I have in my garage? So there's these boats all over the place that are stashed away someplace, and people have just forgotten about them, or they really don't know what they have. The one that my friend owns down in Iowa, it's actually his family's, and it was his great uncle's, and they found pictures of the canoe that were taken in 1934 with his great uncle and his great grandfather in it. And what Jerry's excited about is getting the canoe back in the water and being able to have his father go for a ride in the thing, and having all of his sisters and relatives be able to take part in the ownership of this boat, and it'll be the families. And his whole family is real excited about having this thing back on the water. If you have one of these old canoes, let some of us know, and we can find out, like for instance, Old Town, we have all of the records, the build records from them. We could actually find out when it was built and by who, and what color it was, and when it was shipped and where it was shipped. So those are the interesting things about having these canoes, is just being able to look up the owners, or the original builder. One of the canoes that I have now, I've known about for about 30 years. It was in a friend of mine's barn, and we looked it up last fall, found out it was shipped to La Crosse, Wisconsin in 1916. So that's an example of something that's hidden away someplace and people just kind of forget about it, and in reality it's quite a treasure.
In the early 1950s, 3 surveyors stumbled across an area of land where level was not plumb and plumb was not level, an area that made them lightheaded and dizzy. Their queasiness and problems with surveying equipment only occurred in an area about 300 feet in diameter, an area now braved by 2 million curious visitors a year and voted Michigan's #1 unusual attraction, known as the Mystery Spot.
So we have 4 attractions here at the Mystery Spot. We have a fort maze. That's wooden walls that are built back in the woods. You have to find the right way out of there. Usually that takes about 10 minutes to get through there. There's a bunch of dead ends and only one correct path. We also have 18 holes of miniature golf. It's a custom-made course. Usually takes about 45 minutes to do. And then we have 2 zip lines that you get to ride. The first zip line's about 700 feet long, and the second one's about 450 feet long, and you get to ride both of them when you buy a ticket. And then our main attraction is the Mystery Spot guided tour, and that's a tour all about gravity and optical illusions and different demonstrations that we get you to participate in. And it's a really interactive tour, and usually that takes about 25 minutes or so to go through, and we like to have a lot of fun with you.
It was discovered in 1953. 3 surveyors were checking out this land here, and they realized it was a little bit different from anything that they had seen before. So 2 years later, they opened it up to the public, and we've actually had over 3 million people come through here since then. So quite a few. Now everybody here knows about the law of gravity, right? What goes up must come down. We've heard that a few times. Okay. Well, at the Mystery Spot, that's not always how things work. What goes down here never really stays down. It always comes right back up. That's how everybody's going to be standing throughout the entire tour. So it gives you a little heads up of what we're getting into in the next couple rooms. All right, guys, can we agree that that table is about 2 feet off the ground? Right around there? Yeah? Okay. Well, when you step up onto that here, it feels no different than about a 6-inch street curb because you're pulled straight backwards, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But the cool part is you can come right to the end. You can see a good 6 or 7 inches under the table, and I don't feel like I'm gonna fall off whatsoever, even though I look like I'm about to fall, don't I? So now that you're sitting, what I'm gonna ask you to do for us is stand up out of the chair, but you have to follow a couple rules. Your hands have to stay right on your lap, and then move your feet forward. You can't brace your ankles and legs on the chair, and then stand right up. It's probably about as far as you're gonna get, right? 98% of the people that come through here can't do it either, so you're not supposed to be able to do it.
Yeah, no.
No. It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
It's not happening, no.
Okay, all you have to do for me, sweetie, is lean backwards, okay? Can you lean back? 1, 2, 3. Lean way back. Have you ever said that? Pretty cool, huh? Lean backwards. 1, 2, 3. Good job. Sit really still. Don't move. And there you go. The story says that when the surveyors were here in the general area, none of their equipment was working totally right, and they used something called a plumb bob. When they set up the plumb bob, it was drawn more towards one direction than the other, even when their levels were level. I probably look like I'm about to fall forward, right? But if anything, you feel like you would go backwards. Does anybody want to stand on the wall?
I do.
You gotta be a little bit bigger for this one. Let's see, look at it. Perfect. Okay, walk all the way up to me. Now go this way. Now what way was easier, buddy? Up or down? Up, okay. Because of that slight pull, a lot of people say it's easier to go this way.
Well, that's it for tonight. If you'd like to keep tabs on what's coming up on Discovering or see where we've been, you can join us on Facebook or go to 906outdoors.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Discovering.